Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Late Night Learning. I am your host, Dr. Anthony Palumbo. Today we're going to be talking about methods defense. This is going to be our second portion of this. We're going to be getting into actually one of my particular studies that I presented at an academic conference. Now, we're going to be breaking down a structural equation model, which is enough to make some people faint, some people gag, and other people just walk out of the room. Admittedly, I totally get it. It's one of my favorite methods to run, but it can rather be a really dry explanation without thinking about your audience first. And so I'm going to show you a few things that I did to help couch the model in such a way that it can be a bit more palatable for audience members in the audience. So without further ado, let's get started. So this particular study was entitled Consumer Personalities and Lifestyles at the Box Office and Beyond: How Demographics, Lifestyles, and Personalities Predict Movie Genre and Movie Platform Consumption. Let's keep going. So the descriptive results that I have here, I've laid them out quite easily for my audience. You can see here kind of an easy split across the male females. You can also see here kind of an even split across different age demographics. We can see income, we can see race and ethnicity, as well as political views. And I've done this in such a way to say that really all of these particular metrics are meant to give the audience a sense of who is in the sample, right? We want to be sure that we're upfront with our sampling before we share results regarding anything that we've run. Let's keep going. So here, I've run a preliminary lifestyle factor analysis. This was for a rather advanced audience, so I didn't need to particularly break down a factor analysis, but this was run for participants' lifestyles. So those who are indulging in restaurants, fast food, purchasing online items. We also have travel and business here as well, commuting more than 45 minutes to work every day, working at home. Factor 3, being informed, reading magazines, reading news, business, or professional magazines, and reading newspapers. Let's keep going. And then here we also have preliminary personality factor analysis as well. Again, we've gone through factor analysis in the last video, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time here. Participants' personalities revolved around being unfocused, reliable, and creative is how they perceived themselves. We can see here each factor and then the loadings themselves as we go across unfocused, reliable, and creative. Let's keep going. So here, this is where I want to spend some time. Structural equation modeling. Again, enough to make anybody gag. Understanding that this is a complex model means that we really have to slow down, think about how we can explain something, and be sure that people are on board with us. So, this aids us in understanding relationships. Variables interact with each other, but to what extent? Do 3 independent variables influence one dependent variable? If so, is it possible to look at these relationships simultaneously to see which independent variable is most powerful? So structural equation modeling allows for looking at multiple variables and their relationships simultaneously. So this is a model that often involves multiple dependent variables, multiple independent variables, and essentially you're looking at a process by which they all function and move in unison. That one thing influences one thing that influences another thing, kind of thing. And you'll see as we move along here just what I mean. Let's keep going. So what is structural equation modeling? The technique combines multiple statements or questions regarding a variable into one combined variate. And you'll see this visually because this is very difficult to kind of perceive at first. Independent variates are used to measure dependent variates. So SEM seeks to create a model to highlight relationships among variables based on a data set. What it helps with is illustrating a greater sense of causality. ensuring true understanding of notable relationships. We're avoiding type 1 errors, thinking that some relationship is statistically significant when it really isn't. The estimates, like 0.30, illustrate that for every 1 unit change in an independent variable, the dependent variable will increase 0.30. If that's a positive number. If it's negative, then it would decrease by 30. Let's keep going. So here, this is a way to understand SEM before I show the results, because I've kind of given my audience a lot to chew on, and it's likely that a visual aid is far more helpful for my audience. So you can see with personalities, those 3 factor loadings that we had earlier, they're combined into one variant, personalities, altogether. Lifestyles, with travel and business, indulge, and informed, what we showed earlier, combined into one variant. The same for demographics, the same for movie platform, the same for movie genre as well. Let's keep going. So you can see here that then I've given the particular relationships which are individually statistically significant here. You can see the stars here. You can see the p-values in the bottom left corner, pardon me. So you can see here that if we go back 1 slide, and then if we go up 1 slide, we can see that this is a nice way to kind of show our audience what's behind the model and what the model looks like, right? The raw SEM model shows what goes into each variant. The SEM model is a bit cleaner. It's a bit cleaner. We have movement, we can show direction here, it's cleaner. Let's keep going. If we want to further help our audience out, we can help them further understand what this model is in a much cleaner sense. I've used color-coded text, I've bolded text, I've helped my audience understand this a bit better. How personalities, lifestyles, and demographics predict movie genre frequency consumption and movie platform frequency consumption. I might change that to actually what the recommendation states. I might put my insight at the top, but for the purposes of this particular slide, when I was sharing this at an academic conference, it was easier to do it this way. So we can see on the right-hand side, I have some call-outs and some takeaways. Personalities and lifestyles predicted movie genre frequency consumption. Lifestyles and demographics predicted movie platform frequency consumption. So the recommendation is movie theaters should measure external consumer information alongside internal movie consumption tracked by loyalty card databases. Okay, simple enough. Great takeaway. And visually, I can see, okay, if I need to know who will embrace the latest movie, I'm trying to think of something that was just in movie theaters. The last one I saw was The Batman. So I saw The Batman 2-3 weeks ago. Okay, fine. So from an action perspective, movie marketers should look at my personality and lifestyle as true predictors of whether or not I'll see the movie. Fine, easy enough to digest. And then if we look over here toward the middle and bottom, we can see that lifestyles and demographics might inform movie platform frequency consumption. So they might look at my lifestyle, they might look at my demographic information and say, oh, Anthony's likely to see this movie in a movie theater. Or maybe if I'm younger, I may be more inclined to watch this on my smartphone, or I might be inclined to watch this on my laptop. Very quickly, we have broken down what is otherwise a very complex and jarring model to something that is palatable, easy to understand, and empowers your audience. I cannot overstate that enough. This helps empower your audience. That's what you want in a presentation. Let's keep going. You can see here what I actually shared at the academic conference. Now, everybody at the academic conference is familiar with structural equation modeling, so I didn't really have to go into as much detail as I did in the previous example. But we can see the contrast here, right? This is assuming the audience really knows a lot about this technique. I don't really have to talk too much about it. the stars and the p-values are stated there, and people can kind of just follow along. Let's keep going. So the assumptions that I made here, I didn't think people would be able to remember all of the variates produced by the factor analyses, right? And so if you think back to that raw SEM model, I had a lot of the particular variates kind of out, right? I had them on the left-hand side, I had them around those ovals to show what each variate was made up of. 2, I figured people would struggle with directional relationships. I drew in arrows. That was important. I figured people would be bored by looking at a model. I made that assumption. It doesn't matter that this excites me. If it doesn't excite my audience, I'm out of luck. I needed to make sure that this was at least palatable for my audience, that my audience could at least look at this slide for a minute. I figured some people would desire to see statistically significant results. That's why I had the p-values at the bottom for those who were interested, but not necessary to explain the slide. When we do these things, when we begin to think about who is in the audience, who's going to need what, how can I make this more entertaining? How can I make this colorful? Can I use icons to just simply break down something and make it more visually appealing? When we do these things, we begin to have greater audience engagement. So to kind of wrap up both of these videos, 1, have a slide before your business analytics stats technique. Explain it. 2, use a story. Use a little mini story to help your audience understand what that statistical technique is. 3, if you can or if you need to, break down the analyses in a way that's colorful, visually appealing, and helps bring audiences along. 4, think about callouts. Think about text boxes that can help your audience quickly pull the information that they need. You want to make sure they can come back to the slide and come back out. Additionally, make assumptions about your audience. Think about if your grandmother would want to sit through this, or if your uncle would want to sit through this. How can you break this down so that it's still interesting to them? When we practice these particular exercises, once again, we get greater audience engagement and greater success for our business analytics presentations. Well, that's all the time we have on Late Night Learning. As always, keep laughing and keep learning.